Hey, this is Seth Parnell, the minister at the Portia Church of Christ, and this is episode 196 of the Midweek Bible Study. Hope that you are doing good. Hope everything is going your way. Appreciate you being here, and I hope that this is something that does you good. I know today it was actually a pretty nice day outside. We went to work and everything was pretty good. And so hopefully you've had a pleasant day, and as we're marching on through July, I know we'll be in August here pretty soon. And so July's almost done. This year has just, bolted by. And so hopefully this year has been treating you well, and we appreciate you stopping by to study with us. If you're in the local area, then I encourage you to come by and see us sometime. We are located at 307 South Jackson Street in Portia, Arkansas. Right now we are meeting at 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock on Sunday morning, 5 o'clock on Sunday night, and 6 o'clock on Wednesday night. And so if you're in the area, then please come by and see us. We'd love to see you, love to worship with you, and fellowship with you as well. Right now we are doing a class on Ezra and Nehemiah on Sunday mornings. And we're talking about, building up the wall and some of the obstacles they faced during that. And also on Wednesday night, we're studying the book of Acts. And we just got done with the Philippian jailer, and we're going into Acts chapter 17. And so pretty good stuff if you've ever read through the book of Acts. And so hopefully you can join us for some of those as well. Because there's we're getting, it's going full speed into the missionary journeys now. And so it's going to be some good things to study. But if you're in the area, feel free to come by and see us. And also, if you have any suggestions for future episodes or future topics to cover, then feel free to let that, give us that and get that to me, and we'll see what we can do. I would like one day to do like a question and answer episode. If you have questions, you submit it beforehand, go through and answer them. And so I think that would be pretty cool. We might do that in it for a future episode. And so be thinking of a good question that you might ask later on when we decide to put that in place. But it's good. It's the I think we're gonna be doing good as we go along. It's good to have Jackie Henry here. Hope that you are doing well. Hope that everything is going your way. Appreciate you being here with us and watching with us. And so hope that you're doing well. We also got a Christopher Blessed here. Hope that you are doing well. Watching live from Kenya. Hope that you're doing good. Appreciate you stopping on by as well. Hope everything is going good and your way. And then we also got Donna and Vonda and Jim who are watching. Good to hear from you guys. Hope that you are good, feeling good. We appreciate you being here with us as well. Always good to hear from you. But we're going to be in Judges chapter 16. And we were getting close to finishing up the Judges. We've got technically Samuel is the last judge. And so we may go over a little bit of Samuel after this. But we've gone through a lot. We've gone through, Othniel and Ehud and Shamgar and, Jael and Tola, and Gideon, Deborah, all these different judges who have their stories are similar, but yet they're different in some ways. And they've been moments of great victory. They've been moments of triumph and deliverance, from God in different ways. We know Ehud, killed a king, and that's how he provided deliverance. Deborah, it was a judge. She inspired, she encouraged, the military leaders to do what they needed to do. Gideon, he took just 300 men and defeated a force of over 100,000. Was able to, through the power of God, deliver them as well. And so it's the book of Judges is a book of God's deliverance, and it showcases how the sin of somebody and the mistakes that people make it's not really the end. They don't really have to be the end of the story, but you can be someone who cries out to God, somebody who asks for forgiveness, and someone who accepts the deliverance of God. But the deliverance of God, comes with responsibility. It comes with, a desire in order to be faithful, to God. Because God gives us the opportunity. He's not going to force us to be faithful, but He will give us, like I said, what we need in order to obey Him and to have, that salvation. And so it's a comforting thing to know that we have a God who will give us, second chances, a God who will look out for us, a God who will. It's not just one mistake and we're done, but He gives us that forgiveness, and that's a very, very comforting thing to know. But we get here to Samson and Delilah. Last time we talked about the beginning of the story and how Samson got into a interesting situation, with some of the Philistines that he was around. He wanted a Philistine wife, and so being surrounded by all the Philistines, he makes this big wager of this riddle. He says, if you can answer my riddle, then I will give you 30 changes of clothes. But I think it was actually 60 changes of clothes. And if you cannot answer this riddle, then you pay me that. And as we know, the Philistines cheated. They went and extorted, his fiance, and threatened to burn her house down and her father's house if she didn't tell them the answer to the riddle. And because of that, she told them that, Samson lost the wager, and so he kind of went on a rampage, after that. But we're skipping, chapter 15. If you want to read on your own, you can go through, look at, chapter 15. There's a lot of examples of the strength of Samson. He fights. It says that he inflicts a great slaughter on the Philistines. There's another case in which he is turned over by his own countrymen, and he fights with the jawbone of a donkey, and he kills a great many there. And there's even a scene in which after this victory, he cries out to God and says, God, would you let me die of thirst? Even though after this, great victory. And God splits open a rock that is near him, and he is able to drink water from there and be revived. And so it's a lot of a lot of pretty cool things that are happening. Of course, Samson, of course, was blessed with divine strength and the ability to physically be mighty and powerful. But as we've also noticed, his moral compass was a little bit all over the place, and as we'll see come to pass here in chapter 16. As you know, in the previous chapter, he cried out to God, and he talked to God, and God heard his cry. But now here at the beginning of chapter 16, look at what he's going to do. At the beginning of chapter 16 here in Judges chapter 16, or in verse 1 of Judges chapter 16, it says, once Samson went to Gaza, where he saw a prostitute and went into her. And the Gazites were told, Samson has come here. So they circled around and lay in wait for him all night at the city gate. They kept quiet all night, thinking, let us wait until the light of the morning, and then we will kill him. But Samson lay only until midnight. Then at midnight he rose up, took hold of the doors of the city gate, and the two posts, and pulled them up, bar and all. And he put them on his shoulders and carried them to the top of the hill that is at the front of Hebron. And so this is just one more example of the strength of Samson that he has, the might that he has. There's a number of these that are given, even these short little stories that talk about the physical prowess, the fighting ability, just the raw strength that he has. And there's a number of examples, and this is one more that they gave us in the beginning of chapter 16. But it says he went to Gaza, he saw a prostitute, and he got involved with her. And so the same weakness that he has that were introduced at the beginning of chapter 14, in which he saw this girl, Timnah, and he says that she was pleasing to the eyes, and so he wanted her for his wife. That same weakness that we're introduced to Samson with comes up again here, and it's going to come up again in this chapter. He had the moral compass of Samson was not the most rock solid thing, but rather his physical strength was a whole lot better than his spiritual strength. as we see. And this will have consequences for him down the road. But these people, they think that they can encircle him, and they can encircle the city where he's at. But he just uses his raw strength to carry the gates of the city, the entire gates of a walled city, and carry them up on the top of the hill, which is far beyond what any normal human you could do. But only through the blessings of the power of God would he be able to do that. But he survives this, and then there's kind of a break in the I can't say that word. Chronology. Yeah, there we go. Chronology of this story. When you get to verse 4, as we see it, there's a break here, and then it skips ahead. And it says, after this, he fell in love with a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. And the lords of the Philistines came to her and said to her, coax him and find out what makes his strength so great, and how we may overpower him, so that we may bind him in order to subdue him. And we will each give you 1,100 pieces of silver. And so eventually he gets involved with this woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. And she obviously has an association with the Philistines as well. And eventually this wasn't just like a one-time thing. This was an ongoing relationship that he had with Delilah. And so the Philistines have a secret meeting with her. And they say, find out the source of his strength. And if you do, we'll pay you a lot of money. We'll each give you 1,100 pieces of silver. Now, there are 5 lords of the Philistines. And so that's 1,100 times 5 is what she's going to get. That's the promised, payment. And as we'll see here, the love here in this case is going pretty hard one direction. And when we don't really know if we're not really given an insight into, well, it says that he fell in love with this woman in the valley of Sorek. So he loved her. But this love kind of went only one direction, because you see how quickly Delilah decides in order to take up this offer. She doesn't say, well, I'll give him into your hand, but don't hurt him, or I don't want to do this because I love him. She doesn't say any of that. Instead, immediately after this offer is given in verse 5, what she do in verse 6? So Delilah said to Samson, please tell me what makes your strength so great, and how you could be bound, so that one could subdue you. And so, just as the Philistines, if you remember in chapter 14, they used threats. In this case, they used they threatened to burn down his fiance's house and her father's house. They used threats in the first time to get his wife, to extract information from him. And now they're going to use bribery here in this case to get his in this case to be a girlfriend in this case, to because it never says that they were married, but to get information out of him as well. And so, but even though Samson had a very questionable moral compass, to say the least, Delilah appear to be cut from the same cloth, because Delilah doesn't have much of a moral compass either. And so she's going to try to get this information out of Samson so that she can get rich and she can retire, and maybe she can, live it up, with the rest, of her life. So she asks this question. She says, Samson, please tell me what makes your strength so great, and how you can be bound so that one could subdue you. A very direct question. There's not a whole lot of subtlety going on here, but she asks a direct question. How can you be bound so that someone can subdue you? And so Samson actually gives her an answer here in verse 7. It says, Samson said to her, if they bind me with 7 fresh bowstrings that are not dried out, then I shall become weak and be like anyone else. So then the lords of the Philistines brought her 7 fresh bowstrings that had not dried out, and she bound him with them. And while men were lying in wait in an inner chamber, she said to him, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. But he snapped the bowstrings as a strand of fiber snaps when it touches the fire. And so the secret of his strength was not known. And so she asks him this question. And so he gives them this answer that is a complete lie. It's a complete, fabrication. he doesn't want to tell her the truth in this case, so he makes up the story. He says, if you have 7 fresh bowstrings that are not dried, then I will become weak, as anyone else. And so, what does she do? She tells the Philistines this. They bring her these 7 bowstrings, and so when he's asleep, she ties them up, and then she says, the Philistines are here, in which they were. They came to this inner chamber, as it says, and they were upon him. And so he gets up, but instead of being powerless, as he said, he snaps it. It says like a piece of thread touches the fire. He snaps it in two and is able to defend himself. And so it says the secret of his strength was not known. And so Samson wasn't really supposed to give this information out, but he lies to her, and they figure out that Samson was telling the truth here. And so they're going to try another thing. Here in verse 10 it says, Then Delilah said to Samson, You have mocked me and told me lies. Please tell me how you could be bound. And he said to her, If they bind me with new ropes that have not been used, then I shall become weak and be like anyone else. And so Delilah took new ropes and bound him with them, and said to him, The Philistines are upon you, Samson. The men lying in wait were in an inner chamber, but he snapped the ropes off his arms like a thread. And so she tries the second time. She asks, what is the secret of your strength? How can you be subdued? And he says, it's not 7 bowstrings, but it's new ropes. If you tie me up with new ropes, then that'll be it. I'll be weak. You're just like anyone else. And so she does this. And she says, the Philistines are upon you. And he does the exact same thing. He gets up, he snaps them, and he's ready to defend himself again. And she kind of insults him there, and she says, You have mocked me and you have told me lies, which is true. He did tell her lies. But she says, please tell me how you can be, bound. As we'll see, Samson is going to go through a couple more of these things before we're through. It's good to see the Dunlaps here. Hope that you are doing good. Hope everything is going your way. Appreciate you guys, as always, being here. It's good to see Kathy as well. Hope that you are doing good. Appreciate you being here with us as well. Hope you've enjoyed the day. But he says, these ropes, they are what, will subdue my strength. But in the end, he snaps them off just like anything else. And so then here in verse 13, then it says, Then Delilah said to Samson, Until now you have mocked me and told me lies. Tell me how you can be bound. And he said to her, If you weave the 7 locks of my head with the web and make it tight with a pin, then I shall become weak and be like anyone else. And so while he slept, Delilah took the 7 locks of his head and wove them into the web and made them tight with a pin. And then she said to the Philistines, then she said to him, The Philistines are upon you, Samson. But he awoke from his sleep and pulled away the pin, the loom, and the web. And so he's getting closer to the true source of his strength, which is his hair. If you remember in the early parts in Judges chapter 13, he was instructed not to cut his hair, not to do anything with his hair, because that he was going to be under a Nazirite vow. And so she puts his hair up in this style and with this pin, but in the end the same thing happens. He gets up and he's ready to fight. And so finally she starts to really pull on his emotions and really kind of try to get into his heart. Here in verse 10 she says to him, How can you say I love you when your heart is not with me? You have mocked me these 3 times now and have not told me what makes your strength so great. Finally, after she had nagged him with her words day after day and pestered him, he was tired to death. And so he told her his whole secret and said to her, A razor has never come upon my head, for I have been a Nazirite to God from my mother's womb. If my head were shaved, then my strength would leave me, and I would become weak and be like anyone else. And in verse 18, when Delilah realized that he had told her his whole secret, she sent and called the lords of the Philistines, saying, The time has come, for he has told his whole secret to me. And so it's hard, a little bit hard to understand, as we know with Samson. That he loved her. We know that love can sometimes, and not only love, but in this case maybe more infatuation. It can blind a person. But this has happened 3 times, to Samson, and he still hasn't figured out that this woman is trying to betray him, is trying her best to sell him out, and yet she can't quite figure out, the source of his strength. And it's a wonder, that Samson did not, ask her why, or did not, discover, why she was asking this question. And I was thinking about this, and I think, I don't think Samson was necessarily a stupid person. I don't think that he lacked, intelligence. So we saw from the riddle that he gave in Judges, chapter 14, that he could be, pretty smart. He could be pretty intelligent. And so, but sometimes I think that he kind of got caught up in everything and thought that he was, invincible. Thought that he was, too big, to fall, even though he had gone through some rough things already. He maybe thought that his strength was too much, that even if he told her this secret, even if this happened, he would still be as strong as he ever was. And sometimes people fall into that same trap as well. Sometimes they think that maybe spiritually, or sometimes even physically, they think that they're to a point, at least, if they think that they are invincible. They think that nothing will happen to them, nothing ever could happen to them, that they are too good of a place in order to fall. But what's one thing that the Bible teaches us about some of the most prominent Bible characters? What happened to Peter? The one who preached that sermon on the day of Pentecost, the apostle, in the inner circle of Jesus. What does he do right before Jesus is put on trial? He denies him 3 times and says, "I know not the man," with cursing and swearing. Peter, he wasn't too spiritual, too righteous to fall. And we look at David, the man after God's own heart, someone who was fiercely devoted, passionately devoted to God. He had the sin with Bathsheba. He killed her husband Uriah, and he did other things. He numbered the people when he shouldn't have. He did all those things, even though he was passionately outpoured his heart to God. He wasn't too big to fall. We should never get into a mode of thinking that we think that we look at somebody else's life, or we look at and whatever sin it is out there, and say, I would never do that. I would never be in a situation like that. Maybe we might not phrase it like this, but we might say, I am too righteous to ever do something like that. But the examples that we have in the Bible is that sometimes some very righteous people made some very big mistakes, and they, in the end, they had to ask for forgiveness. They had to repent. They had to come back from that. And so it doesn't matter if you've been a Christian for 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years. You're never going to be too in tune with God that you are not going to make a mistake. But we know that that's something that doesn't make us any less people, doesn't make us any less valuable, but it's the reality of the situation. So I think one of the lessons we can learn from Samson is, as the Bible teaches us, to be diligent, to watch steadily, else we'll fall, else we'll lose our way. Don't think that just because you are someone who maybe reads your Bible, or someone who attends a Bible class, that you are too big in order, or too spiritual in order to fall away, because Satan looks for any opening that he can get, and so we need to strengthen ourselves, and we need to be someone who fortifies ourselves in that way. And because, as we see here, you went with Samson. At least that's the conclusion I come to. You may have a different conclusion that you think of, but the only reason that I can come with why he gave all this to Delilah, even after she repeatedly showed him her true colors, is that he thought that in the end, he was going to be too strong in order to fall. But in the end, as we see here, that's not the case. In verse 18, it says, when Delilah realized that he had told her his whole secret, she sent and called the lords of the Philistines, saying, this time come up, for he has told his whole secret to me. Then the lords of the Philistines came up to her, brought the money in their hands, and she let him fall asleep on her lap. And she called a man, and he had him shave off the 7 locks of his head. He began to weaken, and his strength left him. Then she said, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. And when he awoke from his sleep, he thought, I will go out as other times and shake myself free. But he did not know that the Lord had left him. And so the Philistines seized him and gouged out his eyes, and they brought him down to Gaza, and bound him with the bronze shackles, and he ground at the mill in the prison. But the hair of his head began to grow again after it had been shaved. And so we see the results of Samson giving out this secret. In the end, his immorality caught up with him. And the Philistines, they shave his head, and he goes out, and it's just that, sense of invincibility that he had. He says, I will go out and I will, fight them off just like any time before. But one of the more scariest, verses here is here in verse 20, where he says, I will go out as other time and shake myself free. But he did not know that the Lord had left him. As we know, the hair was the method of it, but in the end, it was God who had blessed him, with that power. And so the Philistines, seized him and gouged out his eyes, and they brought him down, to Gaza. And so in the end, the thing that got him into the most trouble, his eyes, of getting in trouble with these women, is in the end what is taken away from him. And so he's going to be blind for the rest of his life. And he's basically a prisoner at the mercy of the Philistines, and he is going to go through that. But as we're about to end here, I just want to call attention to the end of this story, as we mentioned, with this, as that they call him to a great sacrifice to their god Dagon. A bunch of people were there, and they give credit to the god, Dagon, for giving Samson into their hand, and they it says that they were praising the god and then giving praise to him that Samson had been delivered. And then once they had plenty of wine, once most of them were drunk, says they say, call Samson and let him entertain us. So basically, they're going to try to humiliate Samson, and do all those sorts of things for him. But in verse, 26, and they put him between, 2 pillars. It says, and Samson said to the attendant who held him by the hand, let me feel the pillars on which the house rests, so that I may lean against them. Now the house was full of men and women. All the lords of the Philistines were there. And on the roof there were about 3,000 men and women who looked on while Samson performed. Then Samson called to the Lord and said, Lord God, remember me and strengthen me only this once, O God, so that with this one act of revenge I may pay back the Philistines for my 2 eyes. And Samson grasped the 2 middle pillars on which the house rested, and he leaned his weight against them, his right hand on the one and his left hand on the other. And then Samson said, let me die with the Philistines. And he strained with all his might, and the house fell on the lords and all the people who were in it. So those he killed at his death were more than those he had killed during his life. And then his kindred and family came and down and took him and brought him up and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the tomb of his father Manoah, for he had judged Israel for 20 years. This is the end of the story of Samson here, where he is a prisoner. He's being humiliated. He's being mocked. And he cries out to God and says, give me strength just one more time and let me die here, with, the Philistines. And so in the end, God still uses, Samson, even though he had made all these mistakes, even though he didn't have his eyesight, even though his eyes were gone, even though he was a prisoner, God still used him. He still used him here in this case to fight against the enemies of Israel. And so he places them between the 2 pillars as he leans on them, and then he pushes on them with all his might. And it says that there in verse 30, he killed at his death more than those he had killed during his life. And so you see just how many people were here in this one building. Because if you look at, he killed thousands at a time, during his, his escapades. You go back to chapter 15 and see, how he killed thousands of people. And so there were so many people here, that were present here. But he was able to be used by God one more time and able to deliver, Israel. And he had judged Israel for, 20 years. And so that's the story, of, Samson, someone who had had a lot of problems, but God still used him in a way that he needed, at, the time. And Samson is a cautionary tale to not fall into the same mistakes, that he did, but also one of comfort to know that he can use the most broken, the most, mistake-ridden people in this world. He can still use for his purpose, if for someone who is willing, to be obedient to him and follow his lead. And so that's going to end our look at Samson. Like I said, I think we'll take a brief look at Samuel, and then we'll call it for the judges, and we'll look at something else in order to study on. And I hope this is something that you guys have enjoyed and has done you some good. I think, let's see here. Yeah, we'll be back. We'll be back here next week, for another episode at 7 o'clock on Thursday night. And so, if you're around, come join us. We'd love to see you, love to hear what you have to say, and love for you to join with us, in the study. But until next time, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. Hope it goes well. Hope that your things turn your way, and hope you can go out and be the light of the world and glorify God in everything that you do. We'll catch you next time.